But Jim, let me turn the tables on you. I know what I think about the book because I wrote it and I experienced it. But I'd be interested in your reaction to it in terms of, because you got it, you read it, and you knew me before also. So what insight or what takeaway do you think you have from the book?
Well, I thought I knew you. I knew your passion for the fire service. I knew your escapades in the Washington, D.C. Fire Department. But Brunacini, Frank Brannigan, they tell stories, and that's how we learn from them. And you told and captured a series of stories in your book. And I find that interesting and enjoyable, and it brought back a flood of memories. Not only how I got started in the fire service and how I grew and who helped me and who mentored me, and I've been trying to, I'm not going to write a book, but I've been trying to thank all these people, including you, in 1987 in the ED3 Executive Development class, just before my promotional exam, and how I benefited from that 2 weeks. But the close calls that you have, the kind of crazy things that you did and luckily lived through. And then all of the statistics that are in the book, and you touched on a lot of them. 57% of the American Fire Service seatbelt compliance. Unacceptable, just unacceptable. Being proactive versus reactive, getting out in the community and educating not only the public but the politicians. The residential sprinkler fight that we go through. But I always love reading about Francis Brannigan, and your stories there were super. And there are a lot of people in the book that I didn't know, and you tell their stories. You know, these aren't famous people, these aren't people on the lecture circuit. The seatbelt line of duty death in Texas, the gentleman you mentioned there. So you have a way, I think the book has a way of having you connect with reality. Being able to write those things, whether it's social media or in a book, not being afraid to speak up for a company officer or fire chief, do your job. You drive all of those things home. Easier said than done.
Oh, yes.
You know, I think we've all struggled with those dilemmas. You make the reference in the book. You know, we discipline and fire people all the time for being late, but we have a close call on an instant because I did something I shouldn't have been doing, or I was freelancing, or somebody else was freelancing. There are no consequences. Very little accountability, and you drive that point home very well. And you give the proceeds, some of the proceeds, to a couple of charities.
Yeah.
I think that says a lot about you're not just in this to make a buck. And I was curious to know, how did you pick those two charities?
Well,
there's so many.
Yeah, there's so
How did
many.
you narrow it down to those two?
A couple things. Number one, I'm a cancer survivor. I was diagnosed with prostate cancer and then had my prostate taken out. And when I got home from the doctors after the diagnosis, my wife wasn't there yet, so the first people I called were the Firefighter Cancer Support Network, and left a message, and within 15 minutes the president called me back. So they really were a rock for me to stand on as I went through that process. And then with the Heritage Hall, I was part of that whole process to capture our history, not just the hardware, but the software, if you will, the intellectual development. So I've always, fire trucks are nice, but I wanted to know about the person that rode on that fire truck, that wrote that first manual, that decided, you know, where did the first SCBA come from? Who were the guys that worked on that? And it fell right into the culture thing. If we don't understand our past, we can't appreciate why we're where we are now, and then we can't change a little bit to go to someplace else in the future. So those two organizations are things that are near and dear to my heart, and they need support, because they're not big razzle-dazzle kind of things, they're the nuts and bolts of what we need to do. Chief, thank you very much, I appreciate the opportunity to do this, thank you, I appreciate it.